Corruption is said to undermine justice and the rule of law in societies. On this week's episode of Our Voices, we'll explore how women are affected by corruption as they seek access to basic needs such as health services and even when they try to climb the ladder in leadership positions. We'll discuss this and more from a recent VOA Africa Division series that reveals misconduct across numerous sectors on the continent entitled Dirty Deals: Uncovering Corruption in Africa. Hello there and welcome. I'm Oriani Tangishaka and this is Our Voices. And with me today is my colleague Jeannie Niwa. Siminish is out today. Hello, Jeannie.
Hi.
What are your thoughts on this topic, Jeannie? Are women more prone to corruption as much as men? What do you think?
You know, I approach this topic being biased, thinking that, men are corrupted and women are all victims. But, recent studies actually shows that it's gender neutral. We are all susceptible to be corrupted. However, because women do not, have a tendency is not to have like those managerial position, and corruption is different type of corruption, they are less likely to enter certain type of corruption network, let's say. So there is maybe a difference in the type of corruption they're more susceptible to be.
You are very right. I do agree when you say that the perception is that men are more corrupt. I don't know why, but I think that it's fair to say because, they're not in the spotlight as much as women when it comes to corruption. And that's interesting. I'm going to look at that more, the research on women and corruption. Yeah. Well, joining us to look into this topic deeper is Mrs. Anne Mbewe-Anamela. She is the Executive Director of NGOCC, a non-governmental gender organization coordinating council, who is right now in Lusaka, Zambia. Miss Anne, how are you doing? Welcome to Our Voices.
I'm well, thank you, and thank you for inviting me.
Well, before we dive deep into the questions with you, let's watch this story from Nigeria, where some experts say corruption is really a systemic issue. For example, the country's Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, says the banking sector is responsible for 70% of financial crimes. Reporter Timothy Obiezu tells us more from the capital, Abuja. Let's take a look.
In April 2021, Uche Ohiri learned about an agro-business scheme that offered to pay up to 30% interest on investment in 4 months. She took the bait and invested $550, but the company shut down soon after and its founder vanished into thin air.
I tried to log in. I had access to the website. I could see the fund. I could see the interest, but I could not do anything.
Like Ohiri, hundreds of investors who lost their monies reported the company to the police. But they found out via news reports that the same firm had been accused of a $70,000 bank loan fraud in connivance with corrupt bank officials. The bank in question, though, denied any wrongdoing.
It was a joke at first to me because it has never happened to me. Okay, you guys got to be kidding me. But unfortunately, it wasn't a joke.
Fraud is on the rise in Nigeria's financial system. Nigerian institutions have lost $201 million to fraud since 2020, according to the Financial Institutions Training Center, a research and advocacy organization. Experts say growing electronic payments and less stringent verification standards are making local targets more vulnerable to fraud, and that financial institutions are often unable to thoroughly probe fraud cases due to poor information sharing and lack of coordination.
The system is designed in such a way that its attempt to address corruption is superficial. We need structural strengthening, institutional strengthening, such that not just institution, even process strengthening, such that any conduit pipe for corruption is blocked.
The consulting firm KPMG says only 30% of Nigerian banks have fully implemented anti-fraud measures that allow mandatory verification of the customer's identity before opening an account. In 2021, the central bank asked bank customers to report unauthorized debits to its customer protection desk. Last year, President Bola Tinubu launched an anti-corruption campaign and called for support. And in January, Nigeria's Independent Corrupt Practices Commission, ICPC, and the EFCC said they are teaming up to fight corruption.
We have our own constraints, just like every other organization. But we know that as a commission, that everybody's eyes on the commission. We have been doing our best. We have a good team.
But Boti says words must be matched with action.
Corruption is systemic, then we need a more systemic approach to fighting it. So with all of the initiatives that we have on ground, we need to begin to deploy these things in a truthful manner. So for instance, again, we have the EFCC. They need to do more beyond just picking some few persons here and there. They need to touchlight more. They need to investigate more. They need to prosecute more people.
The global financial watchdog, the Financial Action Task Force, says Nigeria has until May next year to address financial crimes, including terrorism financing, or risk being excluded from the global financing system, which would make it more difficult for Nigeria to do business and access international financing. Nigerian authorities say they'll make sure that doesn't happen. Timothy Obiezu, VOA News, Abuja, Nigeria.
Thank you so much, Timothy Obiezu.
Yeah, and to go back to that gender neutral aspect, I think it's a very, very interesting research that if our audience wants to know more, they can refer to the OSCE.org. Well, they'll know. Yeah, it's very interesting.
Awesome.
So I wanted to ask you, Miss Anamela, is she here?
Yes, she's with us. Can you hear us, Miss Anne?
Yes, I can hear you.
Awesome. So can you briefly give us examples of what constitutes corruption?
Well, I think one of the key things around corruption is that, firstly, it's usually an illegal act. And then secondly, it also involves abuse of one's position. And it also is about that person that is initiating the corrupt action, gaining some sort of advantage out of it. So normally corruption involves solicitation of whether it's financial or material gain for that person that is corrupt. And it happens, in various ways. It could be a request for a direct bribe. It could be double dealing. And as we are seeing in more and more these days, or maybe it's just that we're more alert, the issues of sextortion, all those border on corruption.
Right.
So it's about doing something because you're in a position, and then the other person needs that service, and it's usually around public office, though it does happen in other areas as well.
I agree. Bribe, extortion, and so forth. Well, let's come to Lusaka, where you are, where the president constantly speaks firmly against corruption. And in this next clip that we're about to watch, it's an alleged corruption tactic that happens in the health system. Our colleague Kathy Shorts covered it, and we'll come back.
Charity Musamba is a lecturer at the University of Zambia. She says she experienced the situation aptly described by the president. On March 10, she was waiting for a full blood count examination at a Lusaka health facility, along with her sister who was caring for her, when a medical staffer allegedly attempted to solicit a bribe from her sister, Albert Sato.
Look at the queue of people waiting to be examined, and there's only one machine. And in some cases, it even develops problems as it's been utilized. So if you want your sister to be examined, I can quickly push her name up the list. But that's on condition that you also help me.
Miss Anne, when we look at this particular tactic in the health system, do you think that it's more of a corruption culture, or is it, just people who are innately like that?
I think it's both. There are people that are innately like that, but then when corruption is allowed to perpetuate in a country or in institutions, then it becomes a culture, especially where people think they can get away with it and where addressing corruption is not consistent. So it starts with individuals, indeed, but it does turn into a culture, depending on how it's handled.
Right. So the people can be corrupted as well as the system itself can be corrupted.
Yeah. Thank you, Ms. Anna. We'll, discuss more about the culture of corruption. For now, let's take a short break. When we return, we'll hear more from Ms. Anne Mbewe-Anamela, Executive Director of NGOCC, Non-Governmental Gender Organization Coordinating Council. She will help us look more at possible solutions to fighting corruption. And as usual, we ask you to share your thoughts on this topic on our social media platforms at VOA Africa. We are on Facebook, Instagram, and X, formerly known as Twitter. Use the hashtag VOA Our Voices. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
In times of change, when the world seems uncertain and what we hear doesn't reflect what we see, we seek the truth. When we are told only part of the story, we lose trust. In moments of crisis, our dreams, hopes, and wishes for a better tomorrow depends on a free press. At Voice of America, we bring you the stories that people take risks to see. We connect the world and unite it with truth. At Voice of America, we show you the whole picture.
Health, wellness, sport, beauty, medical breakthroughs. Healthy Living cares about your well-being. What are the main health concerns in Africa and around the world? Find out the latest on coronavirus. Connect with our experts and ask them questions.
How long does the virus stay?
Join me, Lina Khmoudou, in Washington, every week on Healthy Living, right here on VOA.
Welcome back. You're tuned into Our Voices. We're discussing corruption and how women are affected and also which part they play in it. With us via Zoom from Lusaka, Zambia is Miss Anne Mbewe-Anamela, Executive Director of NGOCC, Non-Governmental Gender Organization Coordinating Council, and will now help us look at some possible solutions to fighting corruption. But before that, in Ghana, corruption is a major issue, and state agencies mandated to tackle it are struggling to succeed in their mission. Civil society groups are taking up the challenge with initiatives that exposes corruption in the public sector, creating public awareness, and also pushing for prosecution. Let's take a look and then discuss this further. Isaac Kaledzi has more from Accra, Ghana.
That's because as a journalist, you must have a heart.
These Ghanaian journalists are planning for their next big investigative story. They work for the Fourth Estate, an Accra-based non-profit public interest and accountability initiative by the Media Foundation for West Africa.
We work with Ghanaians, we work with whistleblowers who give us information. And so we look at issues and we go deep into those issues. We bring them out in forms of publications, online write-ups and YouTube videos and all that, mainstream documentaries.
The publications focuses largely on anti-corruption related stories. Since launching in 2021, it has published several groundbreaking anti-graft stories. Among them was an exposé by the project on asset declaration following a requirement that government officials declare their assets. The Fourth Estate filed the case with Ghana's Commission on Human Rights and Administrative Justice that further investigated the matter.
So when we did that story, as many as 294 or so public officials hurriedly declared their assets. In fact, before the publication, they are not declared, but they were in office. But when we published the story, very quickly, they declared their assets. And we thought that that was impactful and it sent the right message to authorities and to public officials.
Anti-corruption campaigners say fighting corruption in Ghana has become a daunting task, despite the country launching the National Anti-Corruption Action Plan, a policy document with plans to combat corruption.
The National Anti-Corruption Action Plan was the blueprint for all of us to fight corruption. However, in all these very glowing attributes that I gave, you would realize that there are so many gaps within the system that we haven't paid attention to. And for that matter, it makes the fight against corruption a difficult one.
Some of those gaps include weak laws that hinder the work of state institutions mandated to investigate and prosecute corrupt public officials. Civil society groups like the Center for Democratic Development (CDD) are filling the gap and taking on the challenge. In 2017, the organization launched the Corruption Watch Project in an attempt to reduce public corruption through advocacy for transparency.
We are able to do original investigations. We have actual investigative journalists as part of the team that do their investigation, but we also try to follow up on cases that are alive or cases that we feel have been buried and we have forgotten, that we think we need to revive.
The activism by the CDD team for the past 7 years appears to be yielding results.
We didn't want the issue of corruption to die and also to be episodic. We just wanted to keep it on the minds of citizens that we need to keep fighting. We need to take an interest. They need to join the fight because we're feeling that corruption was becoming normalized and people felt that, oh, well, that's how it is.
Thanks to the works of these civil society groups, the fight against corruption is on people's mind.
Both as anti-corruption and governance experts and think tanks, a lot of work has been done. We have shown evidence of research that corruption is an issue and it is hydra-headed. And to fight it, we need serious commitment.
Isaac Kaleji, VOA News, Accra.
Thank you so much, Isaac Kalezi, for that report from Accra, Ghana. And indeed, as you've said, fighting corruption is on people's mind, and organizations are trying their very best to do what they can to curb corruption. Now, back to our guest who's on Skype from Lusaka, Zambia, Miss Anne. Now, I often see police officers on the road when I'm on the continent, and they're in the heat of the day, and from what I can gather, their salaries are very small. Is increasing salary in government or civil service positions a sustainable solutions to curbing corruption, especially on the road when you are out and about?
Well, I think it's okay. That's part of the solution, but there is more to it. Earlier on, we spoke about whether it's individual or it's systemic. Mm-hmm. So at an individual level, I think there's need to in a way change mindsets, though, and that's not an easy thing to do. So it's both a cultural issue and it's a systemic issue, and these are personal issues. Increasing salaries might help, but then I don't know to what extent that would help. I think we'd really need a study around that, because there are persons that have been involved in corruption that were fairly in the high income bracket. So is it really about the salaries, or is it about systems, as we said, and about culture and just the practices that have become embedded in the way we do things? So if we were to, for instance, go by the route of increasing salaries, that, of course, would speak to issues around how the economy is growing and how that growth is sustained in order to sustain, higher salaries. But I think it's a combination of things. It's salaries, it's regulation, it's the justice system, and it's looking at our culture and our values, and our values too.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Let's talk more about your organization. We spoke at the top of the show that, the corruption culture, which may be the issue. How does your organization work to curb this in place where it has become part of life?
Well, I think the first thing we do is start with ourselves as an organization. We have a set of principles that we believe in, and that we try to inculcate even in staff, which include transparency, accountability, integrity. And, NGOCC is a membership-based organization, an umbrella organization for 111 NGOs, CBOs, and faith-based organizations around the country. And we all share these values that I've spoken about. So it starts with us as well, even as we monitor what's happening in the country and try to hold other institutions to account. So because we're an advocacy organization and a mouthpiece for women in Zambia, we're able to speak up whenever we notice any trends, or we notice specific incidences of corruption. And then the other thing that we do is also at times engage relevant authorities to bring to light what's happening, or to find out how these issues are being handled, and also to suggest how best we can address issues of corruption. And we also form coalitions with other civil society organizations, because when we form a critical mass and our voice is louder, and we demand answers and raise some of these issues. As NGOCC, we're also part of the Universal Periodic Review mechanism, and we're able to also raise these issues through some of the shadow reports that we do, around these international processes as well.
Very well. We've looked at the banking system. We've looked at the health system. Let's look briefly about the education system. When we look at sextortion, sex for grades, who should we focus on mostly? Should we focus on the teachers, or should we focus on the students? Because we did talk about both the system and the individuals, and we know that students can also be perpetrators of, corruption. Who should we focus on?
Issues of corruption such as these need concerted efforts, when we look at all the possible stakeholders. So yes, the teachers, and this should start right from the colleges and the universities where these teachers come from. I think the issues of extortion should be included even in the syllabus. And when they get into the schools, when they're, taken to the schools now, the school system also should have a system that can allow students to report these incidences without any negative repercussions, and also allow teachers to address these issues, because, as you rightly said, sometimes it's both ways. It's the teachers and it's others, that's the students themselves soliciting. So it needs to start there, and then besides that, we have. We need other regulatory authorities that will ensure that the schools, the universities, and all these other learning institutions are regulated in a way that will first ensure that, for example, we as civil societies could help by ensuring that we sensitize both students and teachers, lecturers against these practices, but also where there are laid down rules and regulations in an organization, even around reporting and around action when these reports are received. There should be regulatory institutions that do their work. And when this is done, also it should be very, very clear what the punitive measures are at institution level as well as at individual level. So it needs a coordinated response with various institutions and individuals too.
Absolutely. But what about the household? You know, it's like not everybody's equal in front of corruption. What can we teach our children? What can be taught, you know, in a household so, you know, people are less likely to commit corruption?
That's a fantastic question, because we have, as NGOCC, now have introduced what we call a household approach. And that is recognizing that most challenges that societies face start at a household approach. And one of the things where we are encouraging in this household approach is dialogue in families. You know, sometimes our culture is such that children cannot talk to their parents. Parents think they really, it's the role of the schools, you know, to teach some of these value systems to the children. So we're encouraging dialogue at household level.
That's right.
And this is working well. It has other effects that we did not expect, very positive. Like, for example, encouraging even women to speak out more out there because they're being consulted more and part of the dialogue at household level. So that's one approach that we are taking. And then there's also the churches. We have churches all across Zambia.
Thank you so much.
And some of these issues can be taken up there.
That's right. Well, that's it for today. Thank you so much. We would like to thank you very much, our guest, Anne Mbewe-Anamela, Executive Director of NGOCC, Non-Governmental Gender Organization Coordinating Council, for shedding light on this very impactful situation of corruption we all of us face, especially women, and the fight to expose it. If you want to watch more of the Dirty Deals Uncovering Corruption in Africa series, along with this and other episode of Our Voices, go on the VOA website at voaafrica.com and our YouTube channel, where you can find the top news stories of the day. Thank you so much, and goodbye.